Hello and welcome to the Middle School Theater PLC group. I am Jodianne Henry and I am the PLC moderator. I'll be covering a very important topic that I think will be beneficial for you as a classroom teacher. So stay tuned. I will be talking about assessments. I will share with you different types of assessments. I will share with you examples of assessments that can be used in a drama classroom, and more importantly, how you can use these assessments to drive your instruction. First off, what is classroom assessment? It is really the process that is used to keep track of what our students are learning and their progress in relation to the learning standards, as well as how they're developing various 21st century skills, which helps to promote their own self-reflection and their personal accountability of their own learning. This is the process that helps to provide basis for profiling our students' performance on the learning standards. Classroom assessment is ongoing. You're constantly identifying and gathering and organizing and interpreting the information about what our learners know and can do and what we need to do as teachers to help them to reach a level of mastery of the standards. As a drama teacher, you are doing these assessments through constant observation of our students in different theater games and activities and scene performances and their writing of the scripts and how well they work as an ensemble. So as theater teachers, we are constantly doing an assessment. It is a natural part of what we do daily in our classroom. What's the purpose of doing assessments? Well, really, stakeholders, they need some way to prove that our students are actually learning. It also helps the teachers to gauge what the students are learning, and it also helps to provide data that will guide your instruction. So as you're teaching, how do you know that the students are actually learning? How do you know that your teaching techniques are effective? And how can you use that data from your assessment to differentiate your lesson and to meet the individual needs of your students? Now, to be effective, assessments in the art classroom, it has to be constant, it has to be consistent, and it also needs to be very specific. So our students know exactly what they're doing well, what their areas that needs improvement, and how they can be accountable for their own growth and development in the classroom. It also helps them to know exactly what you are looking for, and they're not, for example, in a performance, it was good. What about it is good? What exactly are they doing well? What do they need to work on to continually move from a beginning learner or a beginning level to exemplary? Now, the three different types of assessments. There is diagnostic assessment, there's formative assessment, and there's also summative assessment. And these assessments are done during different parts of the instruction. Before instruction, during instruction, and after instruction is given. Now, diagnostic assessment is done before instruction is given. It is the initial evaluation of what our students know regarding the topic, regarding the learning objective, and the standards that we're about to teach. This also is great for activating prior knowledge in our students, and it helps them to make connection between what they know and what they're about to learn. Formative assessment, it evaluates students' progression through a certain learning goal. This can be done in the middle of a lesson. It's a way for you to check for understanding what your students know. This can be done throughout a unit. You're constantly seeing if they're learning, if they're understanding, and if you need to go back and reteach any part of that lesson or any segments of that unit. Now, a summative assessment, this is given at the end. This is done to evaluate the student's mastery of a topic after instruction is given. How much of the information that is taught do these students understand? It is an assessment of learning. What exactly do they know at the end? Now, let's take a closer look at these three different types of assessment. As I mentioned before, diagnostic is done before instruction, and this is done in order to help you better plan for your lessons. Also, you can use your diagnostic assessment. You can use the information for curriculum compacting, which simply means that, let's say you were going to teach a particular content. You're going to talk about Greek theater. And maybe your students have already learned a lot about Greek mythology and Greek culture, which means that in your lesson, you may not need to spend so much time talking or teaching that particular information because they've already been introduced to it. So it allows you to know where do you need to start. Formative assessment. This is done, as I mentioned before, it's ongoing. So the constant observation of how students are performing or working during the rehearsal process, how they're collaborating with their group members, especially during projects and performance tasks that will come at the end. All of that evaluation and observation is ongoing. That would be considered a form of formative assessment. It helps you to make those adjustments during the lesson. Also, it may help you to make adjustments to flexible groups, as well as how you're pacing your lesson or your unit overall. Examples: checklists, exit tickets, student responses, reflections. So I generally have my students complete a rehearsal reflection. Let's say they're working on scenes or they're working on any type of ensemble project. I may have them do a reflection at the end of each day. And it's an opportunity for them to reflect on where they are in the process, what's working, what's not working, what their strengths or weaknesses are. And it also allows me to evaluate their understanding, like what exactly are they getting from that project, what I'm hoping that they get. And I can see where they are in terms of growth and understanding the material better. Also, formative assessment, simply hand raising. So you may have a class discussion and you're asking questions, or students that may agree or not agree, and a show of hands. These assessments can be very quick and informal, and it's just a really great reflective tool to adjust your instruction. All right, now summative assessment. Again, it's after instruction. So this usually is a culminating project or a performance or a written exam. This can be given whole group, it can be given in small groups, individuals, and if it is given in groups, it should be differentiated for each group of students based on where they are. So if these are your beginning level, your students who are developing, students that are mastering, you need to differentiate the assignment, the project, how these students demonstrate the mastery of the standard. You need to differentiate that for each group. Grades are given for the summative assessment, and it's really just to show the students their growth. It allows them to see what they learned so far overall in that unit or that lesson. Now, assessments in the classroom. What exactly does that look like? I always say begin with the end in mind, which means that for any standard I'm about to address, when I'm planning the unit, when I'm planning my lessons, I always try to think of how am I going to prove what my students have learned at the end. So I always have my summative assessment planned at the beginning of the lesson. And oftentimes you can use the same assessment as your pre-assessment. So it becomes the pre and the post-assessment. And it allows to show you growth. So now let's take a closer look at the diagnostic assessments and what that looks like in your classroom. Now, here are some examples of various diagnostic assessments that I've used in my classroom. So, theater games are excellent pre-assessment diagnostic tools. So, I've used the mirror game, in which students are facing each other and they're attempting to match movements. And this can be used with the standard, which requires them to demonstrate effective verbal and nonverbal communication skills. So students are beginning to use movement. They're also using it as a way to connect with their scene partner. Another diagnostic assessment that I've used, it's tableaus. So students may use a minimum of 3 tableaus to highlight key events in a story. And I may use this as a precursor for my playwriting unit when we start talking about elements of the story and parts of the story and the beginning and the middle and the end and the exposition. I use this to allow them to start talking and having discussion about it, but not just to talk about it, but to also it allows them to get up on their feet and they're moving and they're learning while doing. And I'm also able to see and make connections to what they're doing in their English classroom. Also, I may have group poetry movement pieces where they're, again, using nonverbal communication skills. So they're using all of those different skills in this performance piece. And it's also, they're creating a performance. So I may use it as a pre-assessment for these 2 standards to see where they are. So when we begin to work on scenes, or if we're doing a class production, I'm able to see where the students are. I also may pre-assess improv. So the students are learning how to create a character in a performance. So again, this is a pre-assessment to more complex performance assignments that they may have later on in the semester. Now, tools for informal diagnostic assessments. You can use Google Slide, you can use Whiteboard, you can use Padlet, and these are ways in which you can get students quick responses regarding a prompt. So for Google Slide, maybe you have a separate slide for each student so they can write their work or share their work and you can save it for future comparison. Or with Whiteboard, you can have a separate whiteboard for students where they can write their responses without other students being able to see, and then you can share that with the class. Or Padlet, which allows them to, it's a sticky note board where students can write posts and then you can reveal them and have an open discussion about it. Or if you have a discussion board feature with whatever platform you're using for your class, you can post a question and students are able to respond, share their opinion, respond to the question, and you're able to see what their understanding of that particular topic is. And then they're able to comment on other classmates' posts as well. So it begins to spark discussion. Here are some examples of other diagnostic assessments that you may use. Teacher observation and checklists, which can be used for various performance tasks and projects. You can use discussion board responses, as I was mentioning earlier. Games and activities can be used as diagnostic assessments. Self-reflections, questionnaires, simply show of hands to see if the students are understanding, especially during a lesson. It's a quick check for understanding. You can use work samples from your students, tests and quizzes, writing prompts and samples. So these are various ways you can assess students' prior knowledge before instruction. Now, here's an example of a pre-assessment that I used at the beginning of my playwriting unit. So the standard was students are able to develop scripts and they're using personal experiences and a variety of different resources to create their scripts. So this these questions, these are all questions that students should be able to answer at the end of the unit. But I wanted to see how much of this information students may have already learned, or they may have retained from, let's say they're in 7th grade, that they may have retained from the previous year. Now, this type of assessment can be given in different formats. You can let it be a computer test that they do. It could be a paper, pen and paper quiz that they complete during or the beginning of class. I found, especially now that we're teaching virtually, I have found that there are a lot of different programs that I can use online to administer the quiz or the exam. So here are some diagnostic tools that I've used. I've used Quizizz, which is free, and I'm able to start a live quiz, which means that during the class time, I'm able to assign the students and they're able to work on this quiz. Sometimes it can be timed. Sometimes students are given unlimited time to just answer all the questions. I can also assign it as homework where the students will complete it on their own time and then submit it through Quizizz. And I'm able to see the score at the end. This particular diagnostic was covering Greek theater, and we were examining the role of theater in a societal, cultural, and historical context. And of course, we were starting with the Greeks. Now, there's also Kahoot, which is very similar to Quizizz, but it's just giving you different options. Kahoot is also for free. There are paid options, but it can be used on a free account. You can use this to teach during the class. And again, similar to Quizizz, each question can be timed, so you can give a student 30 seconds, a minute and a half to answer a question, and then they move on to the next. And Kahoot has a more competitive nature to it because there's a scoreboard at the end of the game, and students can come in first, second, or third, fourth, or fifth. And oftentimes it creates some type of competitive nature. Kids are having fun, and they're enjoying learning. For me, it's a tool to create engagement or encourage engagement in my classroom. You can also assign the quiz on Kahoot, and again, you can let it be a timed quiz, or you can give them an unlimited amount of time to complete it. You may be able to set a window of days that they need to complete this assignment by. Kahoot, at the end of the game, it creates a report for you that provides excellent data that you can use to direct your instruction. Kahoot tells you the percentage of students that actually passed or scored a 70% or higher on the quiz. It tells you how many students participated. It tells you how many questions. You're also able to identify the questions that were difficult for the students. So you might want to take a look at maybe the wording of the questions, or maybe those particular questions, the topic or whatever the question is asking, maybe you need to spend more time teaching or making sure the students understand that particular topic. It also identifies the students that may need help, your students that are struggling, as well as it'll let you know the students who did not finish. So if a student during the class period may have logged in and they're taking the quiz and then they just kind of stopped, it'll identify those students who just didn't finish. And then you're able to compare the students who need help. Is it because they did not complete the quiz, and did they not complete it because they didn't understand? So you're able to investigate and really pinpoint the students that need the extra attention and may need extra help. And you can figure out how to meet those students' needs and help them to show growth and improvement. Another tool that you can use for diagnostic assessments in your class is the Jamboard. I use the Jamboard to assess prior knowledge, and to start conversation and to help students make connections about what I'm going to teach for that particular lesson. I oftentimes may pose a question regarding the topic that we're going to cover, and I may have students provide as much details that they know about the particular topic, or I may pose a question to get students to really begin to think. So the question on this Jamboard is relating to Greek theater, and the students will provide as many facts about Greek culture that they may already know. And it's an excellent tool to start conversations about what your students already know. So for example, when I started my Greek theater unit, the students knew a lot about Greek mythology. They had an idea in terms of like costumes and just the cultural aspect of that time. So I was able to use it to make connections about the types of plays that were produced, the purpose of theater, how it was used, the festivals. I was really able to make those connections at the beginning of the lesson. Another tool for diagnostic assessment, as I mentioned earlier, is observation. So at the beginning of the semester, I oftentimes have students we spend a lot of time doing theater games and improv, and I am really able to assess the skill sets that my students are already coming in with. So the students who are already able to create characters and are already great storytellers and are already comfortable performing in front of their classmates and creating scenes, students who have excellent vocal skills and are able to use their body, their voice, their facial expression, their imagination to create different characters, I'm able to make those observations at the beginning of the semester and create different groups and group my students based on their abilities. And then I'm able to differentiate and garner the activities that we do and my expectations for each student and each group. Also, these types of performances help to prepare the students for other more challenging or difficult performance tasks that they may have. This is a rubric that I use to assess students' use of effective verbal and nonverbal communication skills in a performance, which they will continually to use these skills in every type of performance that they do throughout the class and classes to come. So they're scored on a begin level, developing level, accomplished, and exemplary. And I'm really assessing their vocal skills, body and facial expression, and staging and blocking. And at the beginning of the semester, I assess them, whether it's the improv, whether it's the theater games, whether it's the group poetry piece. I assess them to see where they are, and at the end of the semester, I use the same rubric to assess them again, and I also use it during their end of semester interview, one-on-one interview with me, to show them where they are and where they are in terms of these skills from a beginning level to where they are at the end of the semester. So it helps me to really sit down and have a conversation with them and to show them their growth. And we may look at different samples, work samples that they've done throughout the semester as a part of that interview, end of semester interview. Now, how can we use the data that we get from these assessments? Again, it provides beginning information for where each student is. So it gives you a guide. You're not just planning activities to keep the students engaged, but you're able to really plan activities and lessons that's going to help the students grow and to master the different standards and to really grasp the learning objectives. It really gives you direction. It allows you the ability to group your students more effectively. So you're able to see the students who need to be challenged, the students who are coming in your classroom and you can push them to probably do more scene work, or you can push, it's a playwriting unit, and these students already have a lot of experience and they're really great at creating conflict and using and developing, creating well-developed characters through their writing. If they're already at that point, then you're able to challenge those students. The students who have more difficulty with brainstorming and writing and character development, then you will work with those students you provide different activities and you differentiate the lesson to meet those students and to help them to grow. It also provides the teacher with an understanding of what topics to give more focus. So if your students are struggling with a certain topic or concept, then maybe you do need to focus more and spend some time so they can better understand that particular topic and not spending a lot of time on something the students already know. It can be used as a comparison tool. So as I mentioned, how I use that rubric to compare where my students are at the beginning of the semester versus at the end of the semester. So it can be used as a pre and post comparison that helps the teacher figure out what they need to revise or to change on their approach or technique, their teaching technique for that particular lesson or unit. The assessments can be a great tool to figure out how you can differentiate your lesson, how you can differentiate the way that you're teaching, though you can differentiate the product, the end result for each student, how they demonstrate the mastery, and it also gives you an individual, a personal evaluation of each student and their growth. Now, let's look at the data from one of the pre-assessments that I used in my class, and I specifically used the Kahoot tool to administer this assessment. So here's a list of students, and their scores are here. I'm able to see that a lot of my students scored 56% and lower. I'm able to identify these students. I may have them in the same group, and I would go back and see what questions are all these students struggling with the same. Do they struggle with the same questions? I may look at the wording of the questions, and maybe I would need to adjust that. But I would look at what each of those questions cover and maybe want to find ways to reteach. Or it's a pre-assessment. What ways I can teach these topics so the students can understand, and at the end of the lesson or unit, they're able to have a better understanding and score better on the quiz or the test. I can identify these students who are already scoring a 79 and then a 78 and 83, and it's a pre-assessment. So I know that these students need to be challenged because they already have a good understanding of the material, and I can identify, well, these are the questions they got wrong, what are their misconceptions. So I'm able to really differentiate. I can see where the students are, and I can plan different activities, figure out how to teach, what techniques I need to use to make sure that there's growth at the end. Now, here is a chart of the students' result from Kahoot, the results at the end of one of those assessments. So Kahoot does a great job at giving the results of the students' quiz, and it creates a spreadsheet. And I oftentimes use this to compare the pre and the post assessment. And I'm able to list the questions, to have all the questions, and to see what questions the students miss. So it creates a nice spreadsheet that I can use to really not only identify students' growth from the pre and the post assessment, but I'm also able to quickly see the median of the scores, as well as the students that definitely need help, that I need to work with in order to improve their grade. Now, Assessments in a traditional classroom, in-person classroom versus a virtual classroom. The assessment in the traditional classroom is very much in the moment. I find, especially with performance assignments, I can see, right? I can feed off of what the students are giving me. So I can look at facial expression. I could see their reactions to certain things. I may ask a question, and even if they're not responding, I'm at least able to see either confusion or they have it. I can certainly do raise hands to show if you are understanding. Quick check for understandings can be done a lot quicker and in the moment. Also, ensemble activities are able to be done better. So I'm able to see how students are able to work well with others to create performances versus in a virtual classroom, assessments, in the moment assessments can take longer because that wait time. Or if a student does not, if cameras aren't on, I'm not able to quickly assess how they're feeling or their understanding based on facial expression and body language. Also, the performances are recorded. So students have the ability to record and edit and make adjustments. So I'm not able to necessarily watch them and give that live feedback all the time. And also because in my virtual classroom, students, they do a lot of group assignments, but I'm also having to do a lot of individual performances because they're not in the same space, and sometimes coordinating them working together can be difficult. So assessing the way they work together and creating a scene and acting as an ensemble can be a little bit difficult. However, with the virtual classroom, I've been able to find excellent tools online that I'm able to assess students' understanding. I'm able to assess them in the moment in the classroom and get a quicker response. So let's recap. There are 3 types of assessments that were discussed. There's the diagnostic assessment, which is used to guide planning. So after activating prior knowledge, you find out what students know about a particular skill or concept or topic before you plan your instruction. Then formative assessment. This is used to drive instruction. You check for understanding during the learning process in order to make changes or to modify the instruction in order to improve and to make sure that students are understanding the material that you are teaching. This is an assessment for learning. Then there's the summative assessment. This is used to assess learning at the end of the unit of study. And this helps to show growth from the beginning, what students knew at the beginning of the unit to the end. Now, where can I find certain lesson plans, unit plans, assessment resources? There are tons of resources available on the Godot website, as well as these documents are posted on the PLC group. You can find curriculum maps for your middle school theater classes. You can find unit plans as well as individual lessons that accompany each unit. Also, the resources that are needed to teach each lesson is attached to the individual lesson plan, as well as the assessments that you can use, the diagnostic assessments or examples of diagnostic assessments that you can use, the formative, the summative assessments. These are all available with the units that are posted here. You can find that particular document under the document section on the Godot community under the Middle School Theater PLC group. You can find that document here, and you're able to find the hyperlinks, and it will lead you to those individual unit plans, curriculum maps, and lesson plans. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, So follow us on social media. We're on all social media platforms. Again, thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.